Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new revenge stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first one is titled, "Make Naughty Films in the Library and Try to Get Me Fired?" That's not how it works. I got a job at the local library in the summer of 2015-2016. Strap in, kids, because, in order for you all to understand the true artistry of my revenge, this is going to be a long, delicious ride. At this time, I was a poor undergrad student who had just gotten out of an abusive relationship and was riddled with anxiety. In my new living situation, I had to earn more money than I was making as a tutor in the college writing center, so I applied to work part-time as a shelver in the mornings before I would go to class. Now, I said local library, but it's actually a bit more complex. The library system I was working for was one of the best in its area of the United States. We had a dozen or so branches. The main branch of the library had a coffee shop, an indoor theater, and a subbasement full of books along with a suspiciously well-kept underground bunker full of important state documents. I worked at a branch, and it was considered one of the larger branches, the second largest in terms of collection, and the only branch outside the main library equipped with a maker lab. I got this job by the grace of some benevolent God, and in part because I have a friend from college who worked in the maker lab that could vouch for my character. After a brief training period in the main library, I arrived for my first real day with a box of donuts for my co-workers in hand and a smile on my face at 6 in the morning. Unfortunately, my manager did not arrive on time. Enter the children's librarian, who did show up early to set up for story time, and let my anxious butt inside. Enter our antagonist, who I will refer to as my least favorite character from Friends, Monica. Monica did not like me from the start. This is in part due to circumstances beyond my control, which I found out after the fact. One of her friends had applied to shelve at the library but did not get the position because Monica's vouching did not carry as much weight as my friend's, as well as the fact that I was better qualified. She also did not like me because, and I cannot make this up, I brought donuts. See, she worked 2 jobs, one as a barista at the coffee shop and bakery across the parking lot, along with her job as a circulation assistant at the library. She was reportedly quite unhappy with my decision to bring donuts from a competing breakfast chain while everyone else passed on her bagels. Fortunately for me, I didn't see much of Monica at this time. She worked a mid-shift since her mornings were at the coffee shop, so she was coming in when I was clocking out. This still didn't stop her from making sure I was aware of her disdain by taking up space in front of my work locker while she was coming on shift, so I would have a hard time getting my things and leaving in time to make my classes or my second job. A few months passed, and around Christmas, a couple of our part-time branch assistants decided they were going to retire. This left us in a bind. We had 2 positions to fill and we were coming up on holiday break, which is a busy time for the library. I had only been working in my position as a shelver since late summer, but something in me read 4 shots of Jack Daniels at 2 a.m. led me to apply for the position anyway. Again, by the grace of some benevolent God, and the recommendation of several people, I got the job. This is a good place to fit this in as well as any. My assistant manager was a good-natured sort of guy who had only started working in his position a couple of months before me. I was the first person he ever trained for both shelvings and for an assistant position. The unfortunate truth was that my being trained by someone who was still in training himself showed. My ability to do my job was also hindered by Monica, who tried multiple times to sabotage me. She would tell me the wrong information or stay quiet if she knew I was misinformed. The problem was that this would backfire on her. Monica would tell me something untrue, and when I would be corrected, I never let her get away with it. Part of the reason I had gotten the position of circulation assistant is because I turned in a programming outline for a weekly anime club at the library. I know, I'm a nerd, but you're on Reddit, so, and it had been approved, but stalled in implementation. I was seen as a figure who could help revitalize our teen programming by our children's librarian. Another blow to Monica, who was in charge of the current programming for teens, which amounted to nothing more than an after-school study hall. Again, we were the second largest library branch in our system. We were expected to do better. encroaching on her teens was nothing short of war, even though I pointed out she had other responsibilities that were piling up around the library that stagnated when she was doing her glorified babysitting. I also got chosen for assignments that made me popular with the library staff. When other branches were short-staffed, our branch would be asked if we could send someone to help pick up the shift. I was given this task quite a bit in the winter for a rather stupid reason. I drove a Jeep, and so my four-wheel drive was ideal for driving unplowed roads. Monica, in comparison, took public transport. So her chances of getting chosen were slim to zero. This also meant I picked up more friends at the other branches. What can I say? I'm charismatic. It helped that I wasn't on my phone all the time, something Monica had been reprimanded for pretty regularly. I'm not talking a couple of checks here and there throughout the hour, I'm talking every 5 minutes, texting, checking Twitter, Tumblr, Facebook, Vine, etc. She did it behind the desk, she did it in the back, she did it on the floor between the stacks, she did it checking in books. And part of the reason she loved watching the teens was because she could be on her phone, practically uninterrupted, for an hour and a half. At one point she lost her phone, used the library phone to call it, and then, when that didn't work, got on the phone with her sister to active her "Where's my phone" feature from home, which meant we were slammed up front while she walked her sister through the process. Now that you have the background information and your FedEx order of Chekhov's guns, here's how this witch got our assistant manager fired. I processed a library card wrong. There was a patron who came in, and through a series of wacky circumstances involving a former security action on him and a very generic but milquetoast name, I mixed up some library accounts, put a new card on the wrong account, and then had to start a new application with a new card. All told, I spent half an hour getting this guy a card and then had to go on my break immediately, because I was 20 minutes from leaving and needed to get my 15 in before I left. In the rush, I left the dead library card on the counter. When I went back, it was gone. I panicked. I looked everywhere for it in the 10 minutes before I had to leave to go to class. I couldn't find it, and when I left, I was so consumed with anxiety about wondering where it went that I neglected to tell anyone what had happened. A big mistake, but anxiety is a hell of a drug. When I came into work a couple of days later, I found out through an email it had been discovered, slotted back in with the other new, unassigned library cards. I knew for damn sure that, of all the places I could have put it, it wouldn't have been there. I realized the person working at that computer when I had come back off my break was Monica. How does this translate to our AM getting fired? Well, I had been the first, and only, assistant he had trained, since we hired our other assistant internally, and this was a capital BD big deal, so my duck up was a mark on his record as well as mine. It was around this point that I left the library. I was starting to get heat from my manager for some other unrelated issues involving mental health days, and I was promoted at the college writing center, making better pay. So I decided to cut my losses and leave. Apparently, they fired my AM not long after, and he was forced to uproot his family, who had already moved so he could work at this job, and move to another state. Part of that was my duck up, I'll admit to that, but the majority of it was because it looked like I had hidden the card after the fact. Fast forward to January of 2017-2018, and take the safety off those guns. This is where we start getting wild. I'm scrolling through Twitter on my lunch break, and a notification pops that someone has liked a chain of tweets from almost 4 months earlier. That's weird in of itself, given I was very active on Twitter at this time, and those were buried by at least 500 more tweets. They were also about how I had talked to someone who worked at the library, and they had left soon after I did, and I was venting about poor leadership. It was very off-brand for my Twitter. I checked out who had liked them, and to my surprise, it was, of all people, Monica. I scrolled through her account and noticed some very interesting things. You see, the Twitter account she had used to like those tweets was a not safe for work BDSM account. Kel surprise. I saw much more of Monica that day than I frankly ever wanted to see. But then I looked closer at some of the pictures, and, despite wanting to use bleach for eye drops, I screen capped a couple and saved them on my laptop before going back to work. Later that day, I sent her a message through Facebook. To be honest, I wanted to know how she found me on Twitter. At that time, I wasn't using my real name, and I was posting a lot of incendiary things about the government, the kind of thing you want to stay anonymous for. In short, I was surprised she had tracked me down and needed to figure out where the leak was. When I approached her about it, she got nasty with me. She told me nobody cared about what I was writing, that I shouldn't talk crap about her work family, and that I had only left the library because I couldn't hack it. Then she blocked me. So, I was upset. I remembered months of enduring abuse from her, how she'd blocked me from making teen programming better just because she wanted some time on her goddamn phone, how she had gotten me in trouble and my boss fired over some petty bullshit, and all the other microaggressions too plentiful to list, and I decided, alright witch, it's on. I went back online after taking a breath, and she must have realized her mistake because she had blocked me on Twitter and locked her account. That was fine by me because I had already gotten what I wanted. The pictures of her that I had saved? Those were taken at the library. See, since we're a rather large branch, we have some pretty recognizable features in the library for anybody who's ever worked there, or even walked inside. She had taken some pictures of herself topless in the back cubicles. There was one picture of herself in her underwear in the stacks, evident by the carpeting pattern, and, most damning, a picture of her flashing her butt with the children's section windows in the background. I gathered all these pictures up, wrote an email as a concerned, anonymous patron to the HR department from a burner email, sent it, and sat back in wait. The effects were pretty damn immediate and started toppling like dominoes. She was fired in a record 2 days, and my friend in the Maker Lab told me she was escorted from the building. None of the other workers knew why. But word spread through the other branches because they had to bring people in to staff her position, which meant a rotating cast of faces coming in and wondering why she'd been fired so immediately. Usually, even in firing people, the library would give them 2 weeks, so the position could be filled. Eventually, someone subbing in must have had a contact in HR, because that's when I started getting messages from literally everyone I ever worked with all at the same time, asking me, did you know Monica was making naughty films in the library? But remember that children's librarian who let me in on my first day, and had recommended me for my promotion? And remember how Monica's other job was at the coffee shop across the parking lot? Well, after the incident with Monica and my assistant manager getting fired, that had a negative effect on my manager's record, so she was fired as well. As the librarian with the most seniority, the children's librarian was appointed interim manager. She had also heard the rumor about Monica but wasn't aware of the details until she got access to those records as the new manager, and saw that Monica had taken pictures and that some of those pictures were in the children's section, which she was, as you might imagine, fiercely protective of. As it just so happened, the owner of the coffee shop across the lot went to her church, so she found him after service and told him about why Monica had been fired from the library. Apparently, there had been a couple of incidences at her other job where she had disappeared into the walk-in with her phone, and some employees thought they saw her in compromising positions but were never sure, so they could never take action on it. After being told about why she'd been fired from the library and that she had been exposing herself, again, in the children's section, where his grandkids play and pick out their books, he also fired her. But wait. There's more. Monica had also been doing well enough at the library and the coffee shop that she'd finally bought herself a car. Great news, except that once she lost both her jobs, she couldn't afford the payments. Trying to get a new job was also difficult, given that her past employers weren't shy about giving her bad references and explaining why she was fired. So her car got repossessed after she missed too many payments. She had also just applied to the college where I was working, so she could get an English undergrad, then a master's in library sciences. She ended up having to withdraw since her scholarship was revoked after she was fired, and she no longer had a reliable way to get to campus. No job, no car, kicked out of college before she even took her first class. Could Monica's life get any worse? Oh, it could. Turns out her boyfriend wasn't aware of her taking these pictures and posting nudes of herself on the internet. When he found out from one of her former co-workers at the library why she'd been fired, it turns out she had lied to him about it. The two of them broke up, and guess where she had been living? So, she ended up moving back in with her mum, who I'm sure was really curious about why her daughter had been having such a streak of bad luck. Sorry, Monica. Looks like no one told you life was gonna be this way. The next one is titled, My neighbor threatened me with a knife if I didn't stop stomping on the floor. Lived above a guy in a really old fourplex and I guess the wood floors squeaked really loudly when I walked around. It's not like I was stomping around either, but the dude would constantly come upstairs and bang on my door and yell at me to stop moving around. I felt badly for him in the beginning because he seemed genuinely frustrated, but he didn't seem to understand or believe that I wasn't slamming my feet on my floor, his ceiling. I called my landlord several times asking him if he had a solution. I couldn't move because I was locked into my lease, but my landlord was just like, buy a lot of rugs. It got to the point that I couldn't take the constant yelling and I was literally either tiptoeing around or hopping from my couch to my chair in order to get out of my living room so that he wouldn't be standing at my door yelling at me. Finally, I went downstairs one day and asked if we could talk about the situation because I felt like maybe if I looked him in the eye when he was calm and explained that I wasn't doing it on purpose and that there was literally nothing more I could do, I had already bought Area's rugs, he would maybe understand. So, I went downstairs and very nicely explained and he seemed to be listening. And then he said, I'm about at the point that if it happens again I'm going to show up at your door with a really big knife. And then he just stared at me. I basically ran out of there, called my landlord and said that I was more or less being threatened, and a month later the guy moved out. And then, as soon as I could, I did too. Super shitty situation. The last one is titled, Won't Change Your Pizza Delivery Number? We'll stoop extra low. The end result of this story, which I will tell you up front, is that we lost the ability to order from several local Pizza Huts live. Growing up, we had a phone number that was very similar to a Pizza Hut. Their number was 555-455-5575 and ours was 555-455-5515. Now, these two numbers are commonly mixed up for obvious reasons. This was back before the days of cell phones and everyone having their own personal number, and we actually had to get a caller ID because of this. For years we had this Pizza Hut's client base call our house, about 50-50 split sober, drunk, and order pizzas. The thing is, people will not listen when you tell them, sorry, wrong number. We would have drunk people call back 4 to 5 times and then begin screaming into the phone, I know this is a ducking Pizza Hut, you a hole. Or give me the number or I'll kick your butt. This was pretty normal, and the Pizza Hut was even aware of this and profusely apologized when we would call them. Never giving us anything for free though, despite the massive inconvenience of the phone ringing off the hook. Well, Pizza Hut corporate then pays for an advertisement on paper, billboard, and phone book. And guess what? They botched the number. They put our number on the things for the phone number as one of the locations in our town for Pizza Hut's pizza. Why? Because 1s and 7s are the same numbers apparently. The phone calls we get start to explode. It goes from like 3 to 5 phone calls a day to like 100 to 200. Initially, we were directing people with a message that simply said, this is not Pizza Hut. Their number is XXX, it didn't end. We would get calls with people screaming into the voice recording, I want a ducking pizza, this is bullshit, I'm going to kill whoever doesn't answer this ducking phone. Aren't boomers great? We got that crap all the time from older people. I cannot tell you how many times I've been told to kill myself for trying to direct someone to the correct place, and for some reason, no one ever listens. Well, upon this happening, my dad calls into the Pizza Hut and says, look, all we want is to not have to change our number. If you guys will please change yours, or pay for ours to be changed, it was like a $10 convince fee or some crap. We will stop getting your damned phone calls. The manager cussed my dad, who had him on speakerphone, calling him a crap load of names and for getting him bad reviews as well as losing customers to his branch, which is locally owned. What a ducking joke. It's costing their business a solid 10 grand easy over a phone number. Why not just change it? I don't know. My dad looks at the phone, hangs up and says, okay, a hole, you want to be like that about it? My dad then instructs my 17-year-old self and my sister to take all calls from now on. If it rings, pick it up, take the order, and say, okay, your pizza should be there in 1.5 hours. Then when they call back to tell them, sorry, the driver just left. And if they call back a third time, say, well, I can get you on the phone with my manager, but he's probably going to kick your butt if you keep complaining. And then switch the phone with someone else and have them say, listen here, witch, you aren't getting your pizza and we are keeping your money, ducking, get over it. Or something along those lines anyway. 2 weeks pass and my dad tries to get said Pizza Hut to change our number for free. Never pointing out that they ducked up their ad, as apparently they were completely oblivious to this fact. Again, the manager screams at my dad saying, I don't have the money to change your ducking number. We even tried calling other Pizza Huts to get the issue resolved, and they're corporate with no real luck. Fair enough, it's game on time now, which why? For 2 reasons. 1, my dad got a phone with a transfer button, and 2, because summer was rolling around, and my sister and I loved ducking with people over this. It was a really bad influence on us, to be honest. We fielded phone calls every day, all day long. We had friends come over and they loved partaking in the same thing. We had a general plan: every other call would get a pizza delivery. On the other calls, we would get them really upset, talking crap to them and saying, okay, do you want to speak with my manager? And just cold transfer them to the Pizza Hut. It took 6 more weeks of us doing this, and the Pizza Hut closed. A few weeks before they closed, we got a phone call from Pizza Hut corporate who more or less threatened us with a cease and desist. Sounded like they didn't really understand what was actually happening, as it accused us of stealing their phone calls. We called their corporate and explained what was going on, and even played our recordings of talking with them before about the issue and ignoring us. All they said is, you had better stop. This is illegal, over and over. We didn't stop. They were aware of what was going on and didn't want to do anything about it. A few weeks after the owner lost his job, he called our house and was trying to argue with my dad about how bad of a person he was because I lost money, and got my butt beat several times. Apparently we had upset a few people off so bad they actually went in and attacked him and other staff. To this day it cracks me up that a company can be so oblivious, and is the single reason I don't believe we live in anything close to a meritocracy. Anyone in this position who has any merit would instantly change the number, but not a corporation who has money to sue, and not a middle manager who has an ego problem. Thanks for listening.